Matthew. As you hear this story read, listen for 3 verbs which relate to Holy Communion. Take, break, give. Hear the word of the Lord. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. All ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets all full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. The word of the Lord. When I was a kid, one of my favorite TV shows was Paladin. Paladin was a gunfighter who always wore black. This is not the character from Dungeons and Dragons. That's somebody else. Paladin was played by Richard Boone. He had this little thin mustache and black wavy hair. He was not conventionally handsome as a TV star, but boy, did he have gravitas. Unlike your ordinary run-of-the-mill gunslingers, Paladin had both a logo and a calling card. His logo was stamped in gold on his holster. The head of a horse, the paladin, like a chess piece. And at the top of his calling card was this logo of the horse head, and beneath the inscription, "Have gun, will travel." I thought that was so cool. Now, as a retired pastor who travels from church to church, filling in for vacationing colleagues, I wish I had a calling card as cool as Paladin's. At the top, there would be a picture of my all-electric Chevy SUV, and the inscription would read, "Have sermon, will travel." As a traveling fill-in, I noticed that some churches read all 3 of the lessons in the lectionary. Some read 2, some read 1, and some don't follow the lectionary at all. So for the past several weeks, you folks have been working your way through that wonderful 8th chapter of Romans. And as the second reading, you've been working through the parables of Jesus in Matthew. Well, that's all well and good, but because you've only read 2 lessons on a Sunday, you've been missing some really good stories out of the Old Testament. For several weeks now, the lectionary has been flipping through the album of our family. Or if you want to use a contemporary metaphor, it has been scrolling through our family Facebook page. You've missed out a lot, but don't worry, I'll bring you up to date. On the first Sunday of July, you missed that lovely story about Rebekah when she first laid eyes on Jacob. Rebekah is riding in a caravan on her way to meet her husband in an arranged marriage. and she looks out and sees this young man walking quickly across the fields. And she asks the servant, "Who is that man walking toward us?" And the servant says, "Well, that's your future husband." And immediately she jumps off her camel, she puts on her jewelry, and she covers her face with a veil. The narrator almost suggests that despite the arranged marriage, for these two, it's love at first sight. And the text reads, "Isaac took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her." It's kind of sweet, really. And then there are some other family stories, the ones that are not so flattering. You sort of wonder how they survived. Most of them concern Jacob, half of a pair of twins that Rebekah bore to Isaac. As a kid, I liked the stories about Jacob and Esau because I was a twin too. The name Jacob means trickster, flim-flam artist. You might remember how Jacob cheated his twin brother Esau out of his inheritance. He did it by taking advantage of Esau's momentary hunger and his proclivity for snap decisions. Esau sold Jacob his birthright for a mess of pottage, that is, for a bowl of lentil soup. Now, admittedly, Esau was not the brightest bulb, but even he did not deserve that. Then you might recall Jacob gets his aging father Isaac to give him the blessing that was due the older brother Esau. This he accomplishes by taking advantage of the old man's terrible eyesight and his love of wild game stew. Esau manages to get a kind of blessing from his father before he dies, but it's a strange kind of blessing that sounds a lot more like a curse. And for all of this, Esau blames Jacob. He vows to kill him as soon as the time of mourning for his father has passed. Jacob gets word of his brother's intention and decides to take an extended vacation for his health. He goes out east to work for his uncle Laban, the brother of Rebekah. And then it turns out that Laban is a bit of kind of a piece of work himself. He has two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Leah, the older daughter, the story says, had weak eyes. But Rachel, the younger daughter, was graceful and beautiful. Uncle Laban strikes a deal with Jacob. "You work for me for 7 years, and I'll let you marry Rachel." So Jacob does. He works for 7 years, and then comes the wedding night. And when Jacob wakes up the next day, he discovers he hasn't married Rachel, he's married Leah. He should have removed that veil before he made those vows. And that's what happens at weddings today. The groom always makes sure the veil is revealed before the vows are made. So chicanery runs in our spiritual family. Well, that was last week's lesson, but don't worry, Jacob gets his own back. By the time we get to chapter 31, today's lesson, Jacob has managed to swindle his brother-in-law, his uncle, out of all his flocks and herds, and he has become exceedingly rich. As we approach today's reading, all those chickens from Jacob's past are coming home to roost. He makes a kind of peace with Laban. They build an altar of stones and call it Mizpah, and they swear, "The Lord watch between you and me while we were absent one from the other." I had a Sunday school teacher who always had us say that at the end of the Sunday school class. We'd get in a circle and we'd all say, just in real hope, in kind of a really holy way, the Lord watch between me and you while we are absent one from the other. She thought it was a benediction. What it means in context is, neither one of us trusts the other farther than we can throw them, so we'll have the Lord keep an eye on both of us. So in today's reading, Jacob is in a real bind. He's a rogue and a liar who has spent his whole life cutting corners, gaming the system, and then running away from the consequences. But now there's no place to run. God calls to him saying, "Return to the land of your ancestors and go to your kindred, and I will be with you." But as night descends in the wilderness, Jacob makes camp at the ford of the river Jabbok, and he has only his own fear for his company, and for good reason, for there is a lot to fear. Jacob is fearing because Esau is on the other side of that river. For more than 2 decades, Esau has been nursing his resentment and plotting his brother's demise. Come daybreak, Jacob could lose everything: his family, his property, and his life. In hopes of softening his brother's murderous mood, Jacob sends generous gifts across the river ahead of him. How many heads of livestock do you think it would take to compensate a man for the loss of his birthright and his father's blessing? Alone at dusk, Jacob fears the coming day. The night falls, and God does show up, just as promised. At least, I think it's God. It's really hard to tell. A man wrestled with him until daybreak, the text says. Now, is Jacob wrestling with some kind of angel, with a representative of God? Or is he wrestling mostly with himself, with a guilty conscience and a past that it is now too late to change? I suppose it's a little of both. I'm really struck by the physicality of this story. This is no ethereal angelic vision. This is flesh against flesh, bone against bone. Think mud and blood and sweat. Think cage fight on the White House lawn. There are no words in this wrestling match, just grunts and sighs. And as the skies begin to lighten, Jacob's opponent strikes him in the hip and throws his hip out of joint. Exhausted and spent, this unnamed stranger finally speaks, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob hangs on. He demands a blessing. And this holy stranger gives him a new name, Israel, which means he has striven with God and with humans and prevailed. And then Jacob goes one bridge too far. He asks the name of this stranger. "Why is it that you ask my name?" comes the reply. And then, as suddenly as it began, this encounter is over. And there he blessed him, the text says. What do you suppose that blessing is all about? Is it this new name that Jacob receives? Was that the blessing? Well, maybe, or perhaps this new self-understanding that the name represents is the blessing. Because up to this point, Jacob has always had some trick up his sleeves, some angle he is working. He had made fools of Isaac and of Esau and of Laban, He'd fooled everybody, but he can't fool God. Oh, he is charming, clever, and cunning, but his true identity is revealed when fear stripped him of all pretense, and all he had to hold on to was God. You might say the experience itself was the blessing, the experience of wrestling in the dark with the Holy One. Maybe you know someone like Jacob. I don't mean someone who tells lies and thinks he can get away with it. I mean someone who has persevered through exceptionally hard times and come away limping, but blessed. And maybe that someone is you. I am the first to admit I do not understand this story. I'm not sure anybody does. I do know that a kind of blessing comes from holding on to God through a long night of struggle, whatever that struggle might be. Jacob wrestled with a stranger whose name was never revealed. Maybe the stranger you wrestle with is named grief or cancer or depression. Maybe you don't know your opponent's name. You just know that life is a struggle right now, and it's hard to see how God could be any part of it. Perhaps at least one message we can draw from this text is, don't give up, don't let go. The struggle might feel like a curse, but in the midst of it we learn who we really are. Amidst the sweat and the pain and the uncertainty, we grab hold of God, and God grabs hold of us, and God's blessing comes along with the limp. Speaking of limps, most of you know that I had an unfortunate encounter with a Jeep about 10 months ago. I was riding my bike on Thomasville Road, headed north early in the morning. It was still dark, and a young man driving said Jeep pulled out and knocked me off my bike, and I started rolling on the tarmac. When I stopped rolling, I looked up and I saw the wheels of my bike under the back wheels of that Jeep. The result of that encounter was a shattered pelvis, a shattered femur, 2 reconstructive surgeries, and a brand new titanium hip. It's really great. One night, early in my stay at the rehab center, the pain was getting pretty bad, and the drugs were not doing what they were supposed to do, and I was in a kind of struggling match myself. Then a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, came in to help me get up and get to the bathroom. Her name was Tanisha. And Tanisha was humming a tune of some kind. I could tell it was some kind of gospel song. "What's that song you're singing?" I said. And she told me, and I said, "Well, sing me the words." And she did. She sang, "I trust in God, my Savior, the one who will never fail. He will never, never fail." Tanisha, would you teach me that song, please? So we started this call and response session through the bathroom door. She'd sing a line and I'd sing it back to her, and by the end of the time we were singing in pretty good 2-part harmony. It was 3 a.m, and I'm pretty sure we were at the TMH Rehab Center over on Medical Drive, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we were at the ford of the river Jabbok. Whatever the case, I'm glad our ancestors decided to include this story in our family album, this unflattering picture of Jacob and his struggle. Every time I read it, I come away limping, but blessed. Praise be to the God of all grace, in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen.